Another edition of the On the Mic podcast, and I know we've had a long break from the UFC. That comes back this weekend, but before that, we've got some NFL playoffs earlier this week. It was known as Black Monday in the NFL, and George McCaskey did himself no favors besides firing Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. So to talk about everything football is a man who I consider a friend and a mentor, a former Bears player himself, the head coach at Carmel High School Football, and one half of the No Name Pod, which he co-hosts alongside his former teammate Olin Kreutz. He's the one and only Jason McKie. Sir, how are you?
Good, man. Thanks for the introduction, man. You know, us fullbacks, man, we don't get introductions like that. First of all, we get no respect. There's only like 2 fullbacks in the league, so I appreciate the intro, man.
Well, if Rich Eisen is going to live his career off of punters or people too, then I will go with fullbacks, and I'll talk to every fullback in the world. But you're also a good friend of mine. And before we really dive into things, I wanted to give you an opportunity. I've kind of been opening the last couple of shows talking about this man, somebody you knew very well, someone who was also a mentor to me that we lost recently, and that was Jeff Dickerson. Mm-hmm. You really saw what it meant to be a part of the Bears family and the way he embodied and going about his body of work every single day, a true professional, but a true like man's man and just someone respected league wide. Just your thoughts on your time around JD and what he meant to you as a player and as a person.
Yeah, obviously, our relationship started when I came here in Chicago. I had the opportunity to meet JD when I was able to host a show called Chicago Huddle with JD and Ryan Cheverini. I was one of the co-hosts on there, myself, Desmond Clark, and I think it was Alex Brown was with us. And it was a live taping at the ESPN Zone. And, JD was just a guy who, just from having an interaction with him on the show, a guy who I came to admire. I admired the way that he carried himself in the media. I admired the way that he presented his stories. And, me being a guy who wanted to get in media and stuff like that, who majored in broadcasting in college and wanted to get in media, he was a guy who I admired and wanted to kind of model, my media presence just like his. And just from us having that relationship early on, that relationship evolved into really good friendship. And, he was a guy who was him and his wife, Caitlin, was at my wedding. His son Parker was at our football camps. It's been a constant presence. When my kids were born, JD was one of the first people to say congratulations. So, he's always at my foundation events. He was always like the key speaker, always golfed in. And anything you ever needed, JD was the first person to offer a helping hand. And, just unfortunate what happened in the situation we're in now. But you just go to show the love, support, and how many people's lives that JD touched. JD was a guy who would give you the shirt off his back. And I know a lot of players, and a lot of former players and current players really respected that about JD because, JD would always get the story across, but he was somebody that you could trust that wasn't going to, misinterpret your words, who wasn't going to, be a snake and go behind your back and tell a story that you may not have wanted to get out there. He was an honest guy and he did it his way. And there's a lot of guys in this business that don't do it the honest way, they do it the grimy way. And JD was one of the few that did it the honest way. And the way he did it was second to none. He was really good at it, obviously. And, it's just sad that we're, I'm losing, not just myself, but a lot of people are losing, a colleague, I'm losing a friend. But the main thing, and I had the opportunity to speak with JD a few days before he made his transition. And, even visiting him in hospice, all he wanted to know about was how I was doing and how my family was doing. And how excited and proud he was that I was coaching. And, he's talking about, hey, Parker's still a free agent and stuff like that when it comes to high school. And, he gave me strength because it was obviously a tough situation. And to be able to have that last moment with him and the way he was, the strength that he exhibited, something I'll never forget. And, I think that, the main thing with JD, the main thing that remained constant with him was, the type of father he was. And, it was amazing father to Parker. And Parker's an amazing guy. And Parker's going to be fine. He's going to go on to do great things. And I know a lot of people in Chicagoland obviously have his back.
Yeah, beautifully said. I know I shared it very quickly on Twitter. I'll share it, with you here as well. I remember, I think it either was the first or the second year that you invited me to attend your foundation event. And, JD was there, and I had gotten to know JD a little bit, and he was, in my corner as a broadcasting student. And I think I had known you for some time, but I was still nervous about going to your events. I didn't want to mess up. I think anyone who knows you and I on social media know that you and I over the years have developed a friendship. And I just remember walking in, he's like, "What's up?" And just acted like he had known me for years.
Yep.
And he's like, "Everything good?" Like that. I knew that was always his first question. Like, "How's your family? How are things?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just kind of nervous." And he's like, "About what?" I'm like, Jason invited me here second year in a row. I just want to do great interviews. And he's like, "Dude," and he just gave me like this pet talk. And then like 20 minutes later, like I felt like I had known you and everybody in that in the gala. I just knew everyone for years, it felt like. And that was kind of the calming presence he had towards me. And I think the one thing it's going to be hard to transition into what we're here to talk about today is it just shows the connection of what the NFL is all about. You saw teams all over the league donate to Parker's GoFundMe. You saw, other Chicago teams, the Cubs, donate to, you saw Obvious Shirts, the local Chicago shirt company, donate over $25,000 more than once, So it's beautiful what this game does. And I think one thing, as hard as it's been for the years since I was a 14-year-old kid crying over what happened in 2006, for the years that I have followed, the one thing that remains consistent with the Chicago Bears organization is that the players leave an everlasting mark in the community, whether it's through media or whether it's through new businesses, whatever it is. I mean, I'm plugging him, and he's not even going to know about this, but Zach Miller's coming to town this weekend for a country music show at Joe's on Wee Street. And you would have never predicted that. I didn't know the guy could sing. I knew he loved music, but he's going on. You're coaching, and I know some of your other teammates have coached, and you've got other guys like Alex and Olin and Lance, like everybody, is doing media stuff these days. So you guys have always kind of kept something going for the city, which really sucks. And I just, this isn't going to be a whole thing about your co-host Olin Kreutz, but I do want to just get the big elephant out of the room with that. As a guy who spent a lot of his time, in your playing career with the Chicago Bears, first and foremost, without getting into the story first, let me just ask you, how would you sum up your relationship with the higher ups inside the Chicago Bears offices?
In terms of, basically, I guess what you call just a working relationship. It's not, rarely did I ever go upstairs in that building, unless it was something contractual or, some type of disciplinary action, which I don't think I've ever been disciplined for anything where I needed to go upstairs, to be quite honest. Or, if I had to go up there and talk to Lovey or, talk to back then, Mr. Angelo, but never on a daily basis have I ever been up there and really talk to owners. And I'm sure it's like that in a lot of organizations. So I'm not just going to single out the Bears. You're a player. It's you have the front office and you have the players. Front office people up at Hallis Hall, they're upstairs. The players are in the locker room, on the field. See them in passing. In particular, George, I would see him. When I was there, he worked in the ticket office. He was like the main guy making sure the tickets and stuff like that. So, see him when you're getting your tickets for the game, and obviously would speak to him then, or, if you're getting on the plane to go to the game, or, he's walking down the hall and, "How you doing, Mr. McCaskey?" "Hey, how you doing, Jason?" So it wasn't like, players, we had personal relationships with people in the front office. Some of the scouts that was there, I had personal relationships with, good relationships with. Chris Ballard in particular. A lot of those guys are responsible for certain guys being in that building. So you tend to build a relationship with those guys. So I would say more so on that side, there was no personal relationship, and it's like that in a lot of buildings.
Yeah. I don't see, insert star player currently,
Right.
mingling with the owners.
No.
I don't think Matt Ryan was hanging out with Arthur Blank every single day, So
Right.
with that said, though, the big story that kind of captivated outside of what the future is of the Chicago Bears is, your co-host your podcast co-host and former teammate Olin Kreutz, mentioned a story, I believe on 670 The Score, that he was offered a job to work with the offensive line a couple years ago and was offered $15 an hour, which is the minimum wage for a Chicago City worker right now. Never mind the legacy that Olin Kreutz left behind. That was it. That was the offer. And then, during the exit interviews and press conferences this week, George McCaskey, for all intents and purposes, said he questioned Olin Kreutz's word on that. So he said you got to take it with a grain of salt, basically called him a liar. First question is, did Olin ever tell you about that story? Did you know about that?
The funny thing is, everybody thinks the story, pretty much came out on the score. We talked about this story and have hinted at it, and I make jokes about it with Olin on our podcast from day one. Olin told me about this way back in the summer. Actually told me about it right after this incident had happened. And I was shocked about it, laughing about it. We both laugh about it and often joke. We joke about it. So this story in our eyes is old, but it just really came out. And the reason why this story came out, and I think Olin's done a good job of going on different media outlets and even on our podcast explaining how this story came out. I think there was one thing, I don't want people to think that he came out and he's trying to throw dirt on the organization. That's not how this came out. Olin was asked the question, would you ever go coach for the Bears or do some type of consulting? And he says, yeah, I did. And they offered me a contract to do it. And this is what was offered. So that's how the story, came out. Olin was asked the question about him coaching or having some type of involvement with the Bears. So that's how the story came out. It wasn't like Olin came out and was just talking about the story to put dirt out there on the Bears. He was asked the question, why aren't you, in that building? And obviously $15 an hour is not enough to get you in the building.
Right. And that led me to my other part of this. And again, like to reiterate what you're saying, it's not like Olin woke up one day and was like, you know what I'm going to talk about today when I call into the radio station? I'm going to come up with this story. No, like you said. And I want to stress that, because I think a lot of people in the public eye have come to Olin's side on this, as they should. But the one reason, besides the fact that you know him and you play with him, you guys co-host a podcast together, which, by the way, you can find on the Apple podcast. So make sure you guys are downloading and subscribing to it, because then this wouldn't be new news to most of you. But for someone who has done so many things post-career, like you have, Jason, getting involved in personal training, getting involved with marketing stuff, now on the coaching level, I don't want to sit here and speak for you or for Olin, but it's not that you need X amount of dollars. It's not like hand me a blank check and then I'll tell you my worth. Right. But for guys like you who have dedicated years upon years to the organization, please bring your offer with a little bit of respect and understanding of what I've done and what I would offer to your franchise. Is that pretty much spot on?
Yeah, definitely. I don't when he told me, when he initially told me about the story, I didn't believe it. I was when he first told me, I was taking it with a grain of salt. You know what I'm saying? But, he went on to detail it and everything. And, it's definitely true. And I was like, wow, it's pretty, in my eyes, I told him that's disrespectful, and I think that's how he took it as well. But at the same time, he wasn't, Olin keeps saying he wasn't shocked by it. That's how things operate. So, that's why he's not there, and Olin's definitely, I think Olin could be a heck of a coach. I consulted Olin to help me with a lot of things coaching here. He's so knowledgeable about the game. He cares about the game. He watches film on a consistent basis. I watch film on a consistent basis. He'll bounce some ideas off of me. I get advice from him. He's a football guy. And the one thing that, when you look at Olin, Olin is embedded in the Chicago Bears culture or the organization. Like, he's a Bear. Like, he bleeds, Chicago Bear. Like, he's passionate about the team. So, I think when he's on different, media outlets and he's giving his advice or his analyzation, that's coming from an honest perspective. Like, none of us former players that are in the media, we don't get our rocks off by the team being bad. And we don't want the team being bad. That hurts us. When the team's bad, there's less appearances for guys. The city's not good. Like, nobody's good. We're not good. I'm frustrated, because I know how hard it is to win a game in the NFL. I know how hard it is to go in and practice all week, whether you're 100% healthy, whether you're unhealthy, and then to go out there and play a tough game on Sunday and then to lose. You don't go out there to lose. These coaches don't go out there to make bad play calls and to not be prepared. They do the best they can, and for whatever reason, obviously, the results haven't been here for a long time. So, us as former players and now, guys in the media, we don't get our rocks off by talking bad about the Bears. We just give an honest analyzation in what we see from being in that building and what we see that's continuing to happen, and we give our analytics on, why things aren't working. We give our opinions on why things aren't working. And, we try to give advice on how to fix things based upon media outlets and questions that were asked. That's your job as an analyst, to give an honest assessment about what you see.
With that said, too, well, obviously we're talking about one of the most historic franchises in the NFL. If you could just kind of speak to what it means to have a bunch of like your former teammates that now not only work in media but represent this organization still to this day. I mean, I don't have to ask you for your opinion. We all know the way a lot of your former teammates were let go. We can go down the list. You know, the Urlacher, the Briggs, the Hester, the Forte, like nobody got a ceremonial walk-off at the end of their career. It was kind of like, here's your papers, there you go. Like, good luck in your future endeavors. And that for me, as someone who grew up watching guys like you and your teammates as a young football fan, 2006 and 85 are the only two teams I know. And the way that things were unceremoniously just kind of thrown away at the end, it kind of begs the question, and maybe you can answer it, Jason. Why are there still so many guys, especially the guys that you know, and including yourself, because you're still talking about this team, obviously, that are still invested in this franchise? It would be so much easier to be like, yeah, I've been there, done that, played with them, and that, you know what, I don't get the same respect. I'm not going to talk about them. But there's something about being a Bear that keeps that bloodline going for guys like yourself. Why does it still matter to really talk about this team?
Yeah, because, we talked about it on our podcast this week, it's the brotherhood that we had. It's the memories. It's the, the things that we went through together. It's some of the people in that building that you built bonds with, that you call family, that make up the Chicago Bears, and Olin said it well on our podcast. He said, the bond that we had as teammates, it's a brotherhood. It's really a family. And that's why we're so close to this day. But when you ask, why we stay here, is because, we were young men, and we were playing a game for one of the best organizations in football, which is the Chicago Bears. I say it over and over again. So you get an opportunity to wear the same uniform that a lot of the greats wore before you, and you get an opportunity to play in front of some of the best fans in the world. It's your team. Like, it's your team. Like, I didn't grow up as a Chicago Bears fan, but I knew who they were. And when I had the opportunity to wear that same jersey as a Walter Payton, as a Matt Suhey, as a Dick Butkus, the list goes on and on. It's like, I'm one of the guys. I'm in line with those guys that wore the same uniform. And it's really a family, and it's an organization that you always will feel a part of because of the people the relationships that you have with people in that building. And like Olin said on our podcast, Brian Urlacher is the Chicago Bears. Lance Briggs is the Chicago Bears. Tony Medlin is the Chicago Bears. Carl Pekarski in that building is the Chicago Bears. All the relationships that you have in that building amongst, people that helped you get ready on a daily basis to play on Sunday, to the people that you went out there and played with on Sunday. Lovie Smith is the Chicago Bears. Those are the memories and bonds that you'll have forever. And, that's why we're still embedded in this team, because this is our team. We're just on a different side of it now. We played for them, but now we're fans, and we want to see the team do well.
For future broadcasters who may watch this is why you don't have questions you want to ask in order, because I wanted to ask one question, but the way you just answer that, I'm going to jump ahead here. And, I don't mean this in any distasteful way towards the history of this franchise, but, I have a very close friend who's a Steelers fan, and he says, where he grew up, it's all nostalgic. It's all about the old Steelers, and it's all this and it's all that. Mm-hmm. And we hear, and we're going to start getting into the coaching conversation here in a second, but we continue to hear we need someone who embodies Chicago Bears culture. We need a Chicago Bear. We need all this. But there needs to be a significant point that needs to be made here. You can be that guy, but you can also be in line with where we are in today's football culture. And, David Kaplan, who was on here recently before the holidays, said, your next coach needs to be a leader of 53 men. Doesn't need to be the best offensive mind. Doesn't need to be the best defensive mind. He needs to be, and everyone's talking about a big name, Jim Harbaugh. But, and he's a former Chicago Bear, and he knows what it means to be a Chicago Bear, and all of that is great. But isn't it important to not only find that person who understands this culture, but can keep it up to date with where we are in the NFL in 2022?
Definitely, and since you brought up Pittsburgh, I'll bring up Pittsburgh because obviously their head coach Mike Tomlin, who I'm a huge fan of, it's having somebody one who can be a leader of men, but somebody that knows how to set a standard and a culture every single day when they set foot in that building amongst his team. And Mike Tomlin is a prime example of that. And I'll share a story that a lot of people already heard, but it was no surprise to me how he handled the situation. But it just goes to show you, the control he has over his roster in terms of when the story came out about Chase Claypool talking about, hey, we need better music at practice, and then you see Mike Tomlin come out and say, hey, look, Chase Claypool was a wide receiver. He'll play wide receiver. I'm the head coach. I'll worry about practice. And then you didn't hear nothing else about it. You know what I'm saying? You got to have somebody that has that type of control, of the locker room, has the respect of his players, but you also got to have somebody that can, that has chemistry with his players. Just this past weekend, you saw when Pittsburgh, they found out they were, had the opportunity to make the playoffs. What did you see? You see Mike Tomlin on Instagram Live dancing with his guys. Like that's the type of player that coach that you need, somebody that can bond with his players. But at the same time, when things are not going the way they should be, he's able to set back on that pedestal and he's able to address situations, and everybody's going to fall in line because they know, it's his way, it's his standard, it's his culture, and we're going to fall in line. So it's a time to go to work. But when it's time to celebrate, he's one of the guys he can celebrate with you. And I think obviously that's why he's been so successful. No losing seasons there. And I think you definitely got to have somebody like that in place. And it, like you said, it don't have to be a former Chicago Bear, but they got to know the culture. They got to know what it means to play in the city. They got to know the history of the city. They got to know the identity of the city, because I really feel like, the Bears organization, the brand of football that needs to be played here should take on the personality of this city. It's a blue collar, tough, gritty, hard nosed. You know what I'm saying? And that's the type of, when you've had those type of teams here in Chicago, you've been successful. When you've drafted those type of players here in Chicago, you've been successful. They've turned into Hall of Fame players. And I think that's the direction you got to go. You can't have, we're not, it's not a cute team. They're going to be ugly wins, but you're going to win the right way. And that's Chicago Bear way. And when you've had coaches who've been able to develop, schemes and game plans and been able to run their team that way, they've been successful. And when you've had coaches who haven't been able to do that or haven't been able to maintain that standard and that culture in that locker room on a daily basis, then you have turnover after turnover. You have a new coach, new GM, new coach, new GM, new coach, new GM. And that goes for any team in the NFL.
Oh, absolutely. And so not to looking inside the division, but I would look at a guy who a lot of people kind of were laughing at after he said this. But, when Dan Campbell got hired to the Detroit Lions, he said, we're going to bust some kneecaps. And it may not be pretty, but that's what we're going to do, because you're going to hit us and we're going to hit you back. And right. The Lions are the Lions, sure. But there was a few games this year where they shocked some people. The Packers at the end of the year, the Arizona Cardinals late in the year. And, they changed playoff seedings. And those are teams that don't give up. Before I get into this long list in front of me about the future of this team, I just want to ask you, and simply put, in your opinion, where did it all go wrong for Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace? If you had to sum it all up, these last years that we've had with them, where did it all go wrong?
I think a lot of things. It's a lot of things. You can't really just pinpoint one thing. I know Pace has had, his share of good draft picks, and he's had a share of bad. Every GM has. So I'm not going to say that. I think the main thing that I've been preaching has been, it's culture and development. Being able to develop the talent on your roster, being able to, have an identity, being able to understand, what we are. I think that, Pace and Nagy had no idea of what their identity as a team was. And I think it confused the players because they didn't know what their identity was. Are we a tough team? Are we a flashy team? Are we, it was no real identity. And, it makes you wonder, did he lose the locker room? I don't know. I'm not in that locker room, but if you have players that are confused about what their role is or who we are as a team and as an organization, well, then, you're going to get, poor, you're going to get a poor performance on the field. And, a lot of things, you look at the play calling with Matt Nagy. I mean, obviously he was a young play caller at Kansas City. He came here, started calling plays, didn't have success. Wouldn't relinquish the play calling. When he did, he would take it back over. You know what I mean? It's a lot of things like that, a lot of confusion, and that confuses the players as well. So it's not really one thing. It's a lot of things that didn't go right. It's unfortunate. I actually like Matt Nagy. I think he's a good guy. I think he'll get another opportunity. But in terms of coaching, it didn't work out. He didn't have the ability to sustain success. I think when he first came here and got the coach of the year, we had a really good defense.
Yeah.
But that sustainability was unrealistic because your offense still didn't score enough points a game. And when you look at it as well, you had Mitch Trubisky. You couldn't develop him or develop a scheme that was tailored toward his skill set. You had the opportunity to get Justin Fields. He fell in our lap. You get him. You had all offseason to look at his skill set, see where his strengths and weaknesses was, but you still didn't necessarily could develop a game plan that suited his talent. You got a great running back in David Montgomery. Here in Chicago, we've had a lot of great running backs. David Montgomery's in line to be, the next great one. And like we've seen, 4th and 1, you want to throw the ball. And David Montgomery's on the sideline. Mismanaged timeouts and all kinds of stuff. I think that just, it happens, but, it can't happen over and over again because this is a production-based business. And if you're not producing, well, then, you won't be here.
I promise you we're going to get to the list, but there's 2 things coming to mind right now. One of those being, go back to something I was talking about earlier, was being, having someone come in here and bring back Chicago Bears football, which is a hard-hitting defense, a tough defense that's not going to bend or break. I think that's a word we heard a lot over the last few years with Matt Nagy is the Bears defense isn't what it used to be, but it is a bend, not break. You can get down the field all day long on this team, but in the red zone, they're gonna stand tough. But you can have these things. You can bring back Chicago Bears culture, and you can have a running back like David Montgomery, and you can run the ball, and you can have a tough defense. But as we've seen, it doesn't mean you have to go through projects 1 through 10 to find a quarterback. Like, it is okay to have a quarterback, right? Like, can you back me up here? Like, we don't need just running backs and great defense. Like, you can have a quarterback, and you have to have the right scheme behind now Justin Fields that where he can reach his potential while also keeping the brand of Chicago Bears football that these fans love to see.
Definitely. And just look at the list of teams in the playoffs, right? They all got good quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills. Was he a great quarterback when he came in? No, but who developed him? Who had opportunity to develop him? Sean McDermott, Brian Daboll, they developed him. They tailored an offense geared toward his skill set. The list goes on and on. Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City with Andy Reid. He didn't come in and start right away. He sat behind Alex Smith, got his opportunity. He was developed. They tailored that offense geared toward his scheme, his skill set. You bring in players that fit that offense. It's not hard. I mean, the list goes. A generational quarterback, and you bring in receivers, and you bring in a guy like him, and just his consistency and him being a multiplier and being able to make people better, and you get a good product, you get a successful team. So it's about development in this league, man. Deep offensively, you got to continue to develop your players. You got to analyze your scheme to make it better, because on the defensive side of the ball, they're doing the same thing. They're analyzing their scheme. They're trying to find ways. Okay, how they hurt us here. How can we game plan and scheme that for next year? You're always trying to evolve as a team, as a player, as a coach, as an owner, as an organization. You're always trying to make your team better.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to, crap on a guy who's already out, but, I think what kind of wrote it for me, that wrote the end of Matt Nagy's era in Chicago, was Justin Fields' first start in Cleveland when Myles Garrett came out after the game. Myles Garrett, a perennial defensive player of the year candidate, one of the best defensive ends in the league. And he's talking to the media post-game saying, we were expecting them to move the pocket and develop more schemes that allowed Justin Fields to be mobile. And it's like, if that's the defending player on another team saying that, and you couldn't recognize that. And it was all she wrote for me with that. But one other thing before, because I promise you, our good friend Aaron Lemming had put together a great spreadsheet that's going to help me read off all these names to you about the future of this team. But one thing I needed to get your opinion on as a former player, we're seeing a lot of former players talk about this. I think you know where I'm going. And it happened a couple weeks ago in New York, but for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that is the saga of Antonio Brown taking off his uniform, leaving the stadium. Now it's a more of a he said, she said. He told them he was hurt during the week, but then there's rumors that he said he wasn't happy at halftime because he had an incentive bonus and he wasn't getting the ball. We know Tom Brady. We've seen Tom Brady year after year get his guys the ball. He goes to bat for his teammates. Just overall, everyone knows the story, so we don't have to dive into the story. But overall, what did you make of that? And if you were on that Buccaneers sideline, would you rather have avoided the Antonio Brown situation, or would you try to calm him down?
It was at first it was weird to see. Obviously seeing it on TV, and you don't really know what's going on. You're like, man, what is he doing? Like he's running off the field, and so you don't really know, and it's hard to make judgment, initially. But at the same time, as a teammate, you saw Mike Evans was trying to calm him down, but he still got to play a game, so there's only so much you can do. And it's just an unfortunate situation. I think Antonio Brown's obviously a great talent, has a ton of ability, and for whatever reason, it's just it's not working out. And I honestly think there's something else going on there. And that's the thing that I think the NFL has to do a better job of, and that's really taking care of its players, because they've done it. I mean, to be quite honest, they've done a shitty job of doing that. They have not taken care of the players. You go out there on a Sunday, you bust your head, you put your life on the line each and every Sunday. Yeah, you're being compensated well, but what people don't realize is how much the NFL makes compared to how much the players get paid, which is ridiculous. And then when you retire, you're just gone. They take away your health care after 5 years. You can't get all your benefits. It's just a damn shame, to be quite honest. And it's sad, and it's definitely a blessing to play in the NFL, but in terms of how they treat, some of the players, it's sad. And I think Antonio Brown's one of the players that does need help. Somebody needs to sit down with him, hear his side of the story. And if he needs help, you got to get him help. And I think NFL does a shitty job of getting its players help.
I'll just ask you on that, because anybody who watches this podcast knows I'm very open about it, and me, so I'm very open about it. My struggles. Would you say this is more towards they need to focus on the mental health side of things when it comes to players as well?
The mental health, physical health, everything, man. I mean, you got to go through hoops and ladders just to get certain benefits. They treat you like you're a stranger and like you're lying or something like that, and it's a damn shame. A lot of these guys have issues, and as you see, how many players we've lost due to mental health, and it's too late. And a lot of these guys have reached out to the NFL, and they haven't done shit, but they continue to say, oh, we have all these resources in place. Yeah, but when a player reaches out and tries to use that resource, let them use it. Let them use it. Be available. Don't say you have all these programs in place, and then when a player reaches out, he doesn't fit the criteria for this. He doesn't fit the criteria for this, and then something happens. Well, what are we really doing here? It looks good and sounds good, but how much of that is really being put into play in terms of players? Not a lot. Not a lot at all.
Yeah, I compliment you for bringing that to light, because I think it is I think to piggyback off that, we see on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays, if a player gets hit in the head, we've got these independent doctors going, I don't like the way that guy got up. And then the broadcast immediately talks about how great the concussion protocol is. And I don't know what the concussion protocol is. I've never been on an NFL game. I know that might surprise a lot of people because I'm incredibly athletic. But when 3 plays later, that player's back in the game. But when you see something, for me, I would always look at it in a sense of, okay, so you see I think a really big one this year was Daniel Jones against the Cowboys. Took a big shot, was getting off the field and stumbled, looking like a guy leaving a bar on a Saturday night, like looked really bad. They rushed him, and it was all about the importance of Daniel Jones's health. Well, when you see something like what Antonio Brown did on the broadcast, instead of saying Antonio Brown has lost it, the same way we have those doctors on the sidelines checking for concussions, there should be medical professionals saying, we need to get Antonio Brown into our offices and figure out what's going on, what led to this. Because it seems to me, and you could probably speak to this better than I can, but unless there's a lawsuit involved, the NFL doesn't really care. Once there's lawsuits, then we care.
100%, man. They're gonna, it's just sad, man. I have a lot of teammates and a lot of friends who, have issues and things like that, and they try to get help, or they try to apply for a benefit and they get denied. So it's just sad, man. It's sad that you can say you have resources in place, but then the player tries to use them and it's not available. And you, like you mentioned, the concussion thing. You get hit on Sunday and concussions are documented, it's on video, but then they try to make it seem like you haven't had one. Well, I mean, the video right here, I don't remember what happened for a whole half. Like the video is right here, but I didn't have a concussion. Okay. And then you have certain incidents with players, it's unfortunate, they're doing what they're doing to themselves and they're not with us no more. And I think a lot of that stuff could have been prevented.
I would absolutely agree. And to your point, talking about how much the players make compared to the NFL, I think people look at those contracts, but what they don't see is the TV deals, the sponsorship deals that the NFL gets, the betting, all the betting and sports gambling that has come into play now, and all those sponsorships and the fantasy football. And all this goes to the league more than it goes to anybody else. But with all that said, because I know you're always gracious with your time, but I do want to, kind of get to the really big important things here. That's the future of the Chicago Bears franchise, and it's going to be a GM and it's going to be a head coach first and foremost. Those two things are the most important. I mentioned a good friend, Aaron Lemming, put together a spreadsheet here. I'm going to go through the entire list of the already scheduled candidates for the head coaching vacancy. I'll start with the head coach and kind of get your thoughts first and foremost. But here are the guys who have scheduled interviews to be the next head coach with the Chicago Bears. And that's Leslie Frazier, current defensive coordinator in Buffalo, Doug Peterson, former Eagles coach, Brian Daboll, a guy you mentioned out in Buffalo. We have Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator of the Packers, Todd Bowles, defensive coordinator of the Buccaneers, Byron Leftwich, the offensive coordinator of the Buccaneers, Matt Eberflus, the Colts defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, and then my personal pick, Brian Flores, the former Miami Dolphins head coach. Without breaking down each and all of those names, I know a lot of people are calling for Jim Harbaugh, and apparently if they come calling, he'll be interested, but he's not scheduled. So of those guys that are currently scheduled, who stands out to you the most?
It's tough. See, that's a tough question because, some of them guys I've been around, some I haven't. I've been around Leslie Frazier my rookie year when he was the DB coaching with Philadelphia. Todd Bowles is a Temple guy. He played at Temple. He coached under Bruce Arians. I've met him on numerous occasions. I think he's a really sharp guy. In terms of the other guys, Brian Daboll, I don't know him personally, but the development that he's done with Josh Allen, I think has been tremendous. Obviously, he spent some time with Nick Saban as well. So I know he's a guy that would have a plan that can be good, that's been successful in this league. Nathaniel Hackett, I don't know too much about them guys. Obviously, we see what they've done with their respective teams. Brian Flores, I think, did a great job in Miami. Surprising that he was fired. He did a tremendous job with what he had down there. So he's a guy who has that head coaching experience, who's had some success, got fired for whatever reason. So I think it's a good list. I think the Bears are doing a good job of bringing everybody in. They got to do their due diligence. They can't leave no stone unturned. You got to interview these guys. But the main thing is, like we've been saying, you got to find somebody that can be a leader, that can establish culture and identity, and that can have a complete plan for this team. And that's not just offense and defensive schemes. That's a complete plan in terms of strength and conditioning, everything, nutrition, all that plays a huge role in your team being successful. What is our plan for this guy? What is our plan for Khalil Mack? How do we keep him on the field? What is our plan for Justin Fields? How can we make him develop? How can we make this offense easier for him to be successful in this offense? What is our plan for David Montgomery? Do we want to get him 20 carries a game? Do we want to limit his carries because he's going to wear down? It's a lot of different things. What is our plan at offensive line? We drafted Tevin Jenkins in the second round. Do we need to, he had a rough start coming off an injury. How do we feel? We got 2 rookie tackles. James Daniels is going to be free agent. A lot of things are going to have to negotiate. But You got to have somebody that can, a football guy, a football GM and coach that can work together, that can put that plan in motion, that's going to put this team on the right track to be competitive and successful.
I know kind of, without trying to persuade you one way or another, I'm just going to ask because I'm going to be biased and I'm going to say right now, I think Brian Flores should have been the first guy. The moment he got his pink slip from Miami, he should have been on the phone with the Chicago Bears. The Bears should have called him. They should have booked a flight. They booked a hotel. He could stay with me. I still live at home. He could have stayed with me. I don't care. Like, this is how bad I feel Brian Flores should be in Chicago. And a lot of people are now reading these reports like he ruffled some feathers in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's very hard to read those reports because unless you're in the building, it's always a he say, she say type thing. Right. But when you have a guy who has obviously received so much respect from those 53 guys on his team, a lot of Dolphins players came out and had a create like almost shocked reaction to him being fired. And it's easy to go, look what he did with Tua and the Miami Dolphins. But, there's so much more to that. If it was coming down to a guy like a Brian Flores, what do you think he brings to this organization because of his experience coaching? And he's one of the very few guys who's coming off this Bill Belichick coaching tree that has actually had success. And he's had success against Belichick himself with not a great roster.
Yeah, I mean, he knows how to get it done. He knows how to win. And, I know he got fired, but you look at what he did with that Miami organization. I mean, they were a team, I think they started 1-7 this year. Yeah. And he flipped the script and always made the playoffs with what he had. He's a guy that knows what it takes to get it done. He's been to the big dance. Obviously, he comes under that Belichick tree. So anytime you have a guy like that who's been to the big dance, who's seen how an organization is supposed to be run, that's what you want. You don't want nobody guessing to see how it's supposed to run. You want somebody that's experienced it. And he's one of those guys that have done it. So, I definitely, if they wanted to hire him and they felt like he was the guy, I think he could be a guy that can get it done because as you see, his players are going to play hard for him. They were, I think, 1-7. And, at that point, a lot of players be like, man, we're throwing in the towel. But they continue to play each and every week. They got better, and they almost made the playoffs. So he's a guy that can get his players to play. And, I don't know what happened there in Miami, but, he's had some success being down there with a roster that didn't have much.
So I'm not going to read off all the names of GM candidates, but there are a few, names on there that are worth mentioning. Rick Smith, former, Houston Texans GM, is one that a lot of people are talking about. Morocco Brown of the Colts, actually two guys, and Ed Dodds, on the Colts. We have a Bills personnel guy. We have a Steelers personnel, a Patriots personnel, a Saints. Like we're looking at these teams who have either drafted very well or I read on Omar Khan in the Steelers organization. He's known around the league for his negotiation tactics when it comes to free agency. It seems like they're putting the list together right on the GM side and on the head coaching side. For you, you talked about it on the head coaching side, but for you, Jason, what would be the thing that you would want this next general manager to come in and focus on the most? Because they're going to have cap space. A lot of people are saying the Bears have a very bad roster in comparison to the league, which I think is up for debate. And when you have a lot of cap space, if you can draft well and you know how to bring in guys and you want to make them part of this franchise that, guys like yourself still talk about, I think you can do it with the right person in that building. So what is the main area of focus for the next GM for you?
Yeah, and the main focus is, whatever that plan and that vision is in terms of your roster, in terms of your team's identity, in regards to that GM and that head coach, you have to draft accordingly. So you're going to be a tough, gritty team, but you need to evaluate tough, gritty guys in the draft, and not just saying tough, like tough on the field, but tough, mentally tough, physically tough, where you're going to have guys who don't have a record of missing games, guys who are available. One of your best abilities is availability. And if you're out there playing week in and week out, he's a guy we can trust. He's a guy we know that's going to be available. So whoever they bring in, they got to make sure that, whatever this team's identity is, they have to draft accordingly. And, it's a crapshoot with the draft. So you also got to develop the talent on your roster. It goes back to what are we going to do to make sure that our guys are developing in the offseason, minicamp, OTAs, what are we going to do nutrition-wise to make sure that they're healthy so that way they're available on Sunday? Especially in this day and age with COVID, you don't know who's going to play week in and week out. So that second and third string guy is going to be a starter at some point. So we can't just develop the starters. We got to develop the second, third string guys, the practice squad guys. And everybody's important.
With that, and this is way down the list of, responsibilities and priorities, but would you like this next regime to come in and say, listen, George McCaskey, Ted Phillips, like, thank you for the opportunity, but like, this is our show. I'm the GM. This is the head coach I've signed. This is our show. And we saw it here in Detroit, where for so long, Calvin Johnson was on the outskirts with the franchise. And, the Lions had the season that they had, but they just brought back Calvin a couple days ago into that building. And he's sending out tweets thanking the Lions organization. And that's somebody who almost went through something similar that Olin Kreutz did. So would it be kind of not on the high priority list, but important for this next regime to come in and say, listen, the guys who have been there and have put on this jersey and embodied what this franchise means, they are just as important to this franchise as those who currently suit up? Like, would you like to see them kind of pay a little bit more respect and get some more guys, guys like yourself and some of your former teammates more involved and showing that respect that they deserve?
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice. I'm sure, the guys like it. We appreciate it. Yeah, very much so. At the end of the day, they got to do what's best for the Chicago Bears organization. And, we just want them to put a winning product, a respectable product out there on the field. It's not about our feelings, it's not about us. We just root for the organization, and we want to have, a competitive organization, guys going, free agents wanting to come here and have success. I love taking my kids to the game. All my other teammates love doing the same thing, taking their kids to the game, going to the game. We like seeing the fans embrace Chicago when you have a winning team. We know what it looks like when you're winning here. It's nothing like it. There's no other city better than Chicago when you have a winning football team. And, that's what we want to see.
With that, kind of to that point, is there any way you think this new regime can grab a hold of maybe guys? And there's one guy that sticks out to me, and it's not for my personal reasons of being, someone I feel like if I saw him on the street, I could have a conversation with him. I could go to lunch with him. And I look at a guy like an Akeem Hicks, who came in this year and said, I want to retire Chicago Bear. And this previous regime was not having it. They just weren't having it. And yes, it's, as you talked about, one of your greatest abilities is to be available, right? And yes, he struggled with injuries, but we heard there was a late season meltdown with the coaching staff and all of that. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there could be a duo, GM and head coach, that could come in, look at a guy like an Akeem Hicks, or look at a guy who's soon to be up for a contract of Roquan Smith, and have a conversation with, let's just say Akeem, for example. Hey, I know you're about to walk out because free agency is here, but is there any way I can talk to you as a man, not as a coach, but as a man? And yes, I'm coming from a coaching perspective, that we need you in this organization. Do you think that is something that they should also kind of focus in on, is maybe not just don't let these guys go because they had a bad relationship with the previous staff on hand?
Definitely, especially guys that can help you on the field in terms of your play, but more importantly in the locker room in terms of, setting that standard and reinforcing that culture on a daily basis. Those are guys that you got to have conversations with, especially young guys like a Roquan Smith who's been playing well, who should be here on a second contract. You can't let good guys, especially guys that fit the scheme and what your identity is, get away. You got to be able to recruit your own guys to stay in the building. So that's something that I think the next GM and head coach is definitely going to have the ability to do, is to be able to keep guys who belong in Chicago to stay in Chicago.
One of my favorite things to do, especially when you and I were working together at 87.7 WGN Sports, is talk about other teams. And, we're knocking on the door of the playoffs. And to everyone, like everyone predicted, the Tennessee Titans are the number one seed in the AFC. The Packers are the number one seed in the NFC. Those two teams have a bye. I just want to go through Wild Card Weekend with you and then just get your overall perspective on the playoffs, if you don't mind, real quick, Jason.
Okay.
It's going to start off with the Cincinnati Bengals and Las Vegas Raiders. Before I go through the rest of the AFC matchups, and we don't have to break all these games down, but that's one I specifically want to look at, because we saw the Bengals late in the season win the division by beating the Chiefs and did so in a shootout. And they got the Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think there's any doubt about that in Jamar Chase. But the Raiders, I don't want to talk about the Chargers, but the Raiders were basically gifted their playoff berth, as were the Steelers in that sense. But
Right.
the Raiders got hot at the right time. The Bengals got hot at the right time. And that's something I learned from you is it's not just the Titans and the Packers who are coming in with the best overall records from the regular season. It's about who's hot coming into the playoffs. And, you can always say the Bengals are the Bengals and the Raiders are the Raiders. Well, one of those two teams are going to have to be victorious this weekend. And they're both a little hot. So how do you look at a matchup in the playoffs with two teams that are coming in hot, riding momentum?
Yeah, it makes for some good football, from football heads. It's going to be exciting to watch. And I'm be front and center. I'm having my popcorn ready. Obviously, Joe Burrow is playing amazing. The Cincinnati defense is playing amazing. Jamar Chase is doing some crazy things. So they're hitting their peak at the right time. The Raiders are as well. They're able to run the ball effectively with Josh Jacobs, Derek Carr, and playing tremendous football. The thing that I worry about with the Raiders is, are they going to have a hangover from that game against the Chargers? We'll see how that goes. But I'm definitely no team that I wouldn't want to play in the playoffs on the AFC side right now is Cincinnati. I definitely don't want to play them.
I agree with you on that. Now, Buffalo, New England, we got a division matchup, in our first, opening weekend of the playoffs. How different is that to face a division rival in the playoffs?
Yeah, it's tough. Like this will be the third time they played each other.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. So we got two good coaches in Sean McDermott, obviously Bill Belichick. And the funny thing is, each one of those games, the way it was played was a different style. You look at New England, the first game, they ran the ball down Buffalo's throat. Second game, Buffalo came back and did some things. So, I think in this is going to be, it's got to be some good coaching involved, because you can't look at the previous game as like your scout tape, because the philosophy and the game plan is going to change dramatically. So this one right here to me is going to be a crapshoot. I think, New England does some good things, obviously. So does Buffalo. They got some talent there. So that's going to be another game that could be as a coin flip. So I think that's, a lot of playmakers on each team. So like I said, there's going to be some more good football to watch in that one too.
Yeah. And then you've got Kansas City and Pittsburgh, two of the greatest coaches we've seen in modern football. Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin, and the Chiefs are the darlings of the AFC, and they have been for the last few years. But, you can never count out, like, anything can happen. It's playoff football. And, I'm not saying the Steelers could upset them, but it's nice to see Ben make it, in the final year of his career. He's got one last playoff run in him. Mm-hmm. Would you just write the Steelers off just because they're going up against the Chiefs?
No, not at all. Ben's been there. He's been in all these playoff games. Obviously, he got a great coach, Mike Tomlin, who's going to have his guys prepared and ready. So I would never write Pittsburgh off. Kansas City, obviously, they got a ton of weapons. You got Patrick Mahomes. You got a great coach, Andy Reid. That defense is playing well. It's another tough game. I know Kansas City is heavily favored in that game, but Pittsburgh's going to come to play. Mike Tomlin teams have always, they've always come to play. And, Pittsburgh and that team are ready to play, especially for Ben. You want to go out on a high note, and what bigger horse to ride off on than beating the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, and, talk about a guy who was there when Jerome Bettis was, calling it a career and ended up going off, riding off into the sunset. I think Ben could, look back on those days. Just go to the NFC real quick. Another division playoff game. We got the Rams in Arizona, and I really don't care anymore because I had Matthew Stafford on my fantasy team, led me to a championship. Actually, it wasn't even him. It was Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit the last 3 weeks, carried me to a championship. So I give him a quick shout out. But again, this is another one of those games where, really both these teams, they kind of lost momentum at different stages of the season. And, I know the Rams kind of blew it against the 49ers, and we'll talk about them here in a second. But this is a team that a matchup of two teams people really thought would be 1 and 2 in the NFC. Now they're 4 and 5, but it should still be really good football, right?
Yeah, definitely a good football game. Arizona is, Kyler Murray is tough. You got a lot of playmakers on that offense, against a really good defense. What the defensive line has. You got Jalen Ramsey out there in the secondary. But I think in this game, it's really Stafford. Has he played well coming down the stretch? Not necessarily. He has the talent to go out there and put on a good performance offensively. You got Cooper Kupp. Obviously, Odell's playing great ball. But I think with that is with him, you just can't turn the ball over, because I think Kyler Murray, if you can't contain him, he's going to give you a headache. And, anything goes in a playoff game, and these are two dynamic offenses, two dynamic teams, two really good defenses. I'm a huge fan of Budda Baker with Arizona. I think he's one of the better players in the league. I love the way he plays the game at that safety position. So it's another, like I said, it's just some good matchups all the way around. I just love the way this playoff, especially this wild card weekend shaped up. A lot of good games, a lot of good matchups that can really go either way. So, obviously in the playoffs, records is out the window. It's all about the scheme and execution amongst each team.
The last two on the NFC, we got Dallas and San Fran. This is a weird one, right? Because Dallas was the darlings of the NFC early on in the year, and everybody loved the Dak Prescott comeback story. But, they've had some injuries, and they've dropped off a little bit. And then on the 49ers, I'm not going to catch a super smile like I had because Jimmy G is my guy. And, I love seeing him kind of defy his own odds where people were calling for Trey Lance. And even playing hurt, he led his team to squeeze in and get into the playoffs. And, it's not because I have friends who are Cowboys fans and I want to see them upset because I'm upset as a Bears fan because my team's not in the playoffs. But I do think this is one of those games like the Cincinnati Las Vegas game where it's like you can't write in your winner here. Like as good as Dallas has been, San Francisco's been there, done that. They've been to a Super Bowl. Jimmy's been in a Super Bowl. He's been around Super Bowl culture in New England. I think this could be a must-see TV between these two teams.
Definitely. I think this can go either way as well. I mean, obviously Jimmy G, but in particular that running game, running game's been playing really well. Really good defense. You got a lot of playmakers, Deebo Samuel, Kittle out there. Jimmy G, who's done it already, who's been in playoff games before, like you mentioned. Then you look at the other side. You got playmakers over there, Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott, all these guys, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, a lot of playmakers. Can Dak get the ball in his playmakers' hands? Can the Cowboys establish a solid running game? Defensively, can Micah Parsons continue to be Micah Parsons? It can go either way. It can go either way. I think it's a really good game. So looking forward to it. And it's going to be a good weekend for football, especially for NFL fans.
I don't want to anger the Philly guy and the Temple guy, but the one that's most easy, in my opinion, is Tampa Bay taking on the Eagles. I actually have NFL Network on. These two teams met in week 6 of this season, and the teams are much different. And no matter what the outburst was, the fact of the matter is Chris Godwin tore an ACL and Antonio Brown's no longer with the team. I do think Tom Brady can get the most out of the guys we've never heard of before, and that needs to go into people's prediction and thought process when approaching this game. But the Eagles did make the playoffs. Is this a game where you just you kind of sit back and just see what Tom Brady's got, at 44?
Yeah, I mean, with Tom Brady, despite who's in the lineup, he's missing a couple guys. I mean, he's Tom Brady. He's a multiplier. So he's going to make, people are going to step up and make plays, and he's going to give you opportunities to make plays. And, when you're around the aura of Tom Brady, everybody plays better. Philly's a scrappy team. They can run the ball as well. They're unpredictable. They've been playing well as of late. Jalen Hurts has had a really good year. So, I like Tampa Bay in this game, but don't be surprised if Philly's definitely going to put up a fight. It's not going to be a cakewalk. So it's another good game, for us on the NFC side, but to see what Tom Brady can do against, a Philly team that's not going to go down easy.
Before the playoffs start, I got to ask you, and then we'll wrap up here. Do you have a Super Bowl pick? Do you have your two teams that you believe will make it?
No, not right now. I'm just gonna watch it, man. I'm not gonna make a prediction. I think it's so many good games. I'm just excited about the parity and how it's spread out and the matchups that we have. I think it's gonna make some good football.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really good football. I want to applaud the NFL. I mean, you as a player, you probably may feel different, but I like the 17-game season, and I think it all worked out in the end. But with that, Jason, before I do let you go, obviously, it would be foolish of me to not recognize what all you're doing over there at Carmel High School as well. How are you feeling after another season? And I know you're always in the building, obviously. I don't have any Carmel High School football gear, but I would definitely rock it. How are you feeling going into this year? And how has the life of a head coach been for you?
It's been good, man. It's a lot of work. I'm actually running late. I gotta go. We got lifting. So we got off-season lifting. So we started at 3:30. So our guys are lifting, trying to get bigger, faster, and stronger. And, everybody's been buying in. And, last year was a tough year. We missed our first game due to COVID, came out of the gate fast, won our first two, went through a rough stretch, had some key injuries during the meat of our schedule, lost some games to some tough opponents, and then came back and finished strong. So we had a lot of young guys that got experience early. And, those young guys got to mature, and they'll get an opportunity to get more experience this year. So it's definitely exciting, man. It's just, like I said, there's a lot of things that, the Bears are trying to do. It's continually trying to establish a culture and a standard every day, and just make sure you guys are working. So, I'm about to head up to the weight room right now. We're about to lift, and we got to get working, man.
Well, if since it's my fault, if I didn't have an injured foot, I do like push-ups and sit-ups, and you can blame me. But you see me do pull-ups, so I don't know how much me working out would make up for it. But you can blame me. Jason, I always appreciate your time. I mean, you're truly not just a friend, but you're one of the very best in the city, and you embody Chicago Bears culture and football culture. Really, I think you're a prime example for how players should be during their career and after their career. And I appreciate it. Hopefully, we don't just do this once a year. I know you're very busy, but I know you're usually always really good at making time for me. So appreciate you going through everything that we went through. Make sure you guys check out the No Name podcast with Jason and Olin Kreutz. And hopefully there's no $15 an hour job offers around that podcast. I wish you and your team all the best moving forward. And again, really appreciate your time.
No problem, man. Keep up the good work, man. Proud of you.